children even died because of these abuses. It was not until 1996 that the last residential school in Canada closed.
Effective immediately, Mr. Boissonnault will focus on clearing the allegations made against him, and the minister who will replace him in the interim.
Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? That feeling of shock, anger, and disbelief? That's exactly what Liberal Party insiders are experiencing right now after Trudeau's sudden decision to fire Randy from the cabinet. Imagine dedicating years of your life to a cause, only to be cast aside when it becomes politically convenient. In this video, we'll explore the human cost of Trudeau's decision and why it's left many Canadians questioning their faith in politics. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. When damaging evidence surfaced, the situation became even more complicated. When Randy's family tree was examined by genealogists, they discovered no evidence of 5 generations of Indigenous ancestry. Even more startling were old yearbook pictures that revealed Randy had always identified as white. Randy's story continued to change as the pressure increased. His claims of direct Indigenous ancestry gave way to evasive remarks regarding cultural connections.
I hope to keep this energetic, but really, it's all about focusing on your needs and how we can work together to build up Canada.
And look, if you want, I would refer you to Jaime Baptiste, who's very clear that Indigenous caucus is open to Indigenous MPs and allies.
However, the harm had already been done. Once supportive Indigenous groups now denounced him as a fake. Every contradiction was exploited by the media, and opposition parties called for action. Everyone looked at Trudeau. How would the Prime Minister react if one of his top cabinet members were the subject of these shocking revelations? Would he support Randy at the expense of his own reputation regarding Native issues? Or would he sever relations and be accused of deserting an ally?
The Prime Minister has said on multiple occasions, Donna, that he plans to lead the Liberals into the next election. But first, he'll need to fend off members of his own party.
Each other, to help those displaced by the attacks and the hostage families going through untold suffering.
As Trudeau sidestepped questions and Randy went to ground, the tension grew for weeks. At last, there was no denying the truth. Randy's assertions of Indigenous identity were shown to be untrue. The man who gained prominence as a First Nation spokesperson was a complete fraud. The worst part is that Randy's dishonesty extends far beyond his heritage claims. The controversy surrounding Indigenous identity was only the beginning. The Liberal government would be rocked by what investigators discovered about Randy's covert activities. Making up an Indigenous identity might seem like the lowest a politician can go. Rethink your thought. Randy's heritage lies seem trivial in comparison to his actual crimes. As we uncover the layers of his deceit, you'll see why Trudeau was forced to fire him, even though it may have been too late. Let's discuss the regulations that cabinet ministers must adhere to. While they are in office, they are not permitted to operate businesses. It's quite straightforward. You cannot simultaneously enrich yourself and serve the public. However, Randy, he broke these rules into a million pieces rather than merely bending them. A shocking revelation was made by an unnamed whistleblower. Randy was secretly running his former company while he was occupied with his role as minister.
Can take charge and start steering the ship again, because right now, as one analyst told me, it looks like things are out of control because they are.
Ones that I have communicated with have all been remarkably supportive. So anyone that has something negative to say hasn't said it to me yet.
This has nothing to do with a small side gig. This was a full-fledged operation, complete with backdoor meetings and dubious transactions. There is a ton of evidence against Randy. According to financial documents, he was still in charge of his company, making important choices and reaping financial rewards. All the while, he was meant to be serving Canadians. But hold on, things get worse. Randy did everything he could to hide his identity. He created shell corporations, used fictitious names, and even had his wife serve as a front for his illicit activities. This is where the interesting part begins. For what length of time was Trudeau aware of this mess? Did he ignore it to keep his star minister safe, or was he in the dark? According to insiders, there were warning signs for months or even years. However, Trudeau stood by Randy and protected him at all costs.
It is incumbent on me and on every leader, from premiers to police chiefs, to give anti-Semitism
is also going to be crucial. That's something that his party and the PMO are going to have to consider when they think about what sort of message.
The full scope of Randy's corruption became clear as investigators continued their investigation. Millions of dollars are at stake in dubious contracts, influence peddling, and insider trading. A minister with his hand in the cookie jar wasn't all that this was. Under everyone's noses, Randy had established a whole underground empire.
Mr. Boissonnault had said or hadn't said around his own heritage have just come to a boil. Yesterday, the NDP joined the Conservatives.
Months on expanding membership eligibility to Payments Canada to other regulated entities. And this will be done carefully in a way that balances responsible innovation.
The damage is extensive, and it is obvious that Canada's oversight mechanisms were a complete failure. How did Randy continue to get away with this? More significantly, is there anyone else who could be playing the same game? At long last, Trudeau was forced to fire Randy. But even more questions are raised by his response to this scandal. What kept him from acting sooner? What else could he be concealing? Do you recall Trudeau referring to the accusations made against Randy as a distraction? As it happens, he was the one who was distracting. We will find a trail of breadcrumbs that will lead directly to the Prime Minister's office as we remove the layers of this political onion. The question is not if Trudeau knew, but rather how much he was prepared to risk in order to keep it a secret.
That is taking action to address current and historical discrimination while protecting and advancing LGBTQ2 communities' rights. More than a means of communication. They are bridges between communities, vehicles of mutual understanding, and symbols of our respect for diversity.
Despite the mounting evidence, Trudeau persisted in his defense of Randy. He attempted to dismiss the opposition's inquiries in Parliament, saying they were merely an attempt to divert attention away from the pressing problems that Canadians were facing. The worst part is that Trudeau was aware of Randy's wrongdoing for months before firing him. The picture painted by leaked memos is damning. Behind closed doors, Trudeau's team was frantically trying to limit the damage while he was publicly lauding Randy. These records demonstrate that long before the public learned of Randy's dubious activities, the Prime Minister's office was informed. Trudeau, however, decided to go around in circles rather than act. Let's examine Trudeau's public remarks in more detail. He repeatedly stood up for Randy, dismissing the opposition's attention to the scandal as a distraction from the government's goals. He even went so far as to say that the opposition was attempting to keep the Liberal Party's voices quiet. Although it was a masterful deflection, the truth would eventually surface. The story from inside sources differs greatly from Trudeau's public persona. The Prime Minister's inner circle was in full-fledged crisis mode while he was occupied with playing defense. They were aware that the scandal could blow up at any time, bringing down not only Randy but possibly the entire government as well. What then compelled Trudeau to act? Was it the growing pressure from the public? The possibility of more harmful leaks? Or did he just see how much of a political liability it was becoming to protect Randy?
Our roadmap to a fairer Canada for every generation. It is literally our plan to make the promise of Canada.
Representing people, and the reason that the reason I sought out a way to refer to myself when I was running was so that I could do so in a sensitive and respectful manner.
Regardless of the cause, Trudeau's efforts to protect his minister finally backfired spectacularly. Trudeau himself appointed the former Canadian Attorney General, and he didn't mince words. A Prime Minister who genuinely cared about reconciliation, she said, would have evicted Randy long ago. This scathing assessment from Trudeau's own people demonstrates how badly he handled the matter. When all is said and done, it is evident that Trudeau's leadership is being put to the ultimate test. His frantic efforts to shield Randy have only served to cast doubt on his own moral character and judgment. Trudeau may now discover that he is the one losing allies as the political fallout spreads. Trudeau's opponents sense blood in the water, and his supporters are dwindling. A political firestorm that threatens to engulf his entire government has been sparked by the Prime Minister's wildly unsuccessful attempts to protect Randy. Chaos breaks out in the corridors of power as the scandal grows. The opposition parties are attacking, calling for accountability and answers. They viciously questioned Trudeau during a recent parliamentary session about his choice to retain Randy in the cabinet in spite of the growing accusations. "Why is it that he always stands up for corruption on his own side?" asked one opposition leader bluntly. Trudeau's credibility was severely damaged by this pointed question, which also revealed the apparent hypocrisy in his leadership.